Hey, hey, how goes it, everybody?
Hello, hello, hello.
Welcome to another Threat Thursday Live. So we'll give it a few seconds before we kick off, let a few people drop in. This one should be pretty interesting. It's not the normal kind of thing we typically cover, but we really liked it. We thought it was cool to see it built, so we're gonna talk to it about for you guys for a bit. Cool, that was a minute. That's probably long enough. Let's kick this thing off, Tyler. So today we're not talking about one of our normal threats, are we? We're talking about an IOC.
Yes. So similar to our threats in the IOCs, we still go through some of the key or like some of the novel behaviors of what we observe in the threat actor, but we include some of the known or observed C2 infrastructure check-ins as well at the end. So a way to kind of test if your edge devices or your firewalls or proxy servers, things like that, are picking up on these known malicious IP addresses or network indicators.
It gives you just a different look, not the typical threat landscape, but more validation of those lower levels on the pyramid of pain, you know.
Yep.
But this one was pretty cool. It caught our interest. We're talking about ClearFake. They were running a pretty cool campaign here recently, as early as April of 24, up until what, just a couple months ago. Was
Yeah,
when
but so yeah, the reporting is pretty recent. Like you said, it started earlier this year. We're still seeing observed activity all the way through the summer, so which means that it likely is still occurring, just not being reported on, completely up to date yet.
Yeah, and there's some ties to TA 571 and a few other unnamed actors or potential actors that we know of, but none of it is super clear. They're basically making those attributions based on some of the payloads and second or third stage downloads that they're seeing. What was cool about this one is who it's targeting. Like when you think about the normal attribution for these groups or for the kind of people that would fall for this, you're thinking finance, healthcare, manufacturing, and government, those kind of things in larger, more modern countries. But they're even being a little more specific and they're targeting people directly utilizing some form of crypto or working in or working with cryptocurrency as a whole. So that's made this one a little different and really interesting in how they're targeting people.
Yeah, it seems like it's more of kind of like a victim of opportunity as opposed to a more targeted approach. I know you said that they are targeting some of the crypto websites. So it's if you're on the crypto website for a certain amount of time, it will basically facilitate this pop-up if it's already been hijacked or a web browser injection. So it'll have this pop up come. It's like, oh, you have an error. One of the main errors that it talks about, I believe, is that the root certificate is wrong, and they are kind enough to provide you with this fix here. So if you click copy fix, it's going to give you a PowerShell script that they then want you to run. Open up Windows PowerShell as an admin, paste that script in there, and then it'll actually execute the malicious campaign that they have.
So all in all, it's a pretty cool way to target people without targeting. You're targeting a specific niche, but not the people per se. And all they're
Yeah,
doing is they're compromising some of these websites with some malicious HTML or JavaScript. And if the user stays on the site long enough, it feeds them this cool little pop-up we can see on the screen. And this was something me and you were talking about earlier before the stream, where a lot of these organizations, and I mean, we even saw it from our time in Gov, you kind of get conditioned to just say, yeah, whatever, and trust it and go, because certs are always bad or invalid. Like there's always some kind of problem with the websites that are being used, especially internally.
yeah, 100%. You
So
see it all the time with the internal websites, or like you said, any of the government websites. It's like the cert, this is a self-signed cert, or this cert is expired, and you're just like, well, I'm so used to it, I'm just gonna click continue anyway, or do whatever the fix says. I mean, this looks pretty good. It would definitely have me stop where it says open Windows PowerShell as an admin, but I could see for someone that maybe isn't on the lookout for something like that, you could definitely be fooled into putting what is the fix, quote unquote, into onto your machine.
yeah, the average user probably wouldn't think twice about it. They're like, yeah, it's just some fancy IT stuff I have to do to fix it. Let me do it
Mhm.
now instead of calling the help desk or tech support or someone. It'll just get it out of the way.
Exactly.
So once that happens, all in all, it's pretty cool. That happens, you get a PowerShell download, and then it goes through and does a bunch of different little steps ahead of time, like doing things like clearing your DNS cache, it clears out your clipboard, and then it does a really cool check. to determine if it's sandboxed or not. You know, tell them about that, Tyler. Actually, this is probably a good time to hop into threat and show it to them because you have this running there, right?
Yeah, for sure. So we can hop into Scythe real quick. Hop into Scythe. I already launched the campaign, so let me just load all the steps it has on here and hop to the bottom. So like Trey said, it goes in. It'll do the clearing of the DNS cache. We have the get DNS cache in there just before we clear it, just in case anybody wants to have a record of what their cache was beforehand. We set the clipboard to null. And then it goes in, the way that it goes in to check if you are running in a sandbox, like Trey said, is to check the temperature of the machine itself. Because typically, EC2 instance or a VM or a sandbox, if you get sent there by your EDR, those machines don't have a temperature because they're not running on bare metal. They exist in the hypervisor, so they don't have a temperature. But how it checks that is it loads this decimal string in here. It loads all of that in there, which if we toss it in CyberChef and decode it, we could see that it just runs the get sim instance, which is basically the new way of doing WMI. It'll run WMI and then try to pull the thermal zone temperature out of it, which is your internal temperature of your machine. And if it does not get a hit on that, it'll basically end the campaign itself because it thinks that it's being sandboxed and it isn't going to execute on the endpoint itself. So we have in here just a pretty simple um, uh, decoding statement, I guess you could call it, in PowerShell that goes in, it runs that decimal string, and then it'll apply some logic to go in there and then decode it and then execute the decoded string right there. And this is running in our lab. We have an EC2 instance, so we're not getting anything returned because it is a VM. In real life, this would stop the campaign. We've also included this one, which this just converts to dir. So just to do a directory listing, just to kind of show that it does work. And this is the directory we have all of our other campaigns execute. We have a question from Vic. So he said, what is the point of clearing the DNS cache and clipboard? So they clear the DNS cache because in some of the follow-on campaigns that they have, they try to poison your local DNS to try to redirect you to a malicious site or somewhere else where they want you to go. And then the point of clearing the clipboard is later on in the threat, they actually replace your clipboard contents with their cryptocurrency wallet. So that way, if like again, this is targeting people who go to crypto websites, or one of the things it's targeting is people who go to crypto websites. So it's putting their crypto key or their crypto wallet key into your clipboard. So when you go in to make a transaction, it will replace it with their key instead of whatever you're trying to put in. So you inadvertently send them money. Is kind of
Yeah,
the long-winded way to say it.
yeah, so they're clearing your clipboard so that they can permanently put something else in there. They run a clipboard hijacker that we are going to
Mm,
get to here and some of the additional payloads. But that's all it's basically doing is doing that check to see if you've put something in there, and if it matches, it basically replaces, say, like the wallet address or something you copied with theirs, so
yep.
that when they paste it, they're unintentionally sending funds somewhere else. So
Hmm.
for stuff like that.
Yes, we have that. After it goes in and checks if you're running on a VM, again, via that temperature, it'll download a zip file from the C2. So in here, we just have a, call it discovery.zip that we're going to download. What it'll do after that is decompress or expand that archive, and any executables that existed in that directory, it's going to execute on your machine. So in our instance, to emulate that, we just have a discovery script in there that goes in, excuse me, that goes in, runs some typical discovery commands like ipconfig, hostname, things like that, and then outputs those to a file. So after it runs whatever executables are in there, it's going to set that clipboard value with the value of that cryptocurrency wallet. So in here, we just have a random string. This isn't my crypto wallet. If you guys want that, just shoot me a DM on Twitter. Have my name on there. But it's just a random string into it. You could modify this to run in maybe like a while true statement or something like that. So it would constantly go in and set your clipboard value to this cryptocurrency wallet. Or we have in an additional threat that we have. It will look to see if there's any. It'll look every few seconds, every 2 or 3 seconds, I think, and see if there are any changes to your clipboard. And if there is, it will copy that value out. So you could apply the same logic to that, the same logic from that to this thread as well. So it'll constantly update the clipboard with the value that it wants.
Yeah, and they do have several other things with this too. They got the clipboard hijacker there, but they're also putting in several other different malware variants. One being a crypto miner. There's been some evidence of a Luma stealer being put in place as well. A couple different Trojanized DLLs in place with it. And there's a lot going on, realistically, I think, based on what potential threat is utilizing it at the time. So it kind of
Hmm.
seems like there's a bit of cooperation and multi-use going on here.
Yeah, the one thing I thought was interesting in this when we were trying to name the threat, right? It was like, well, Trey had said that it had been utilized. Who is it? What is it in my notes? By the TA571 broker. But it's like we don't really want to call it that because it's used. This is kind of like a stage zero that seems to be utilized by multiple different threat actors or even information stealing clusters and things like that. So we just called it the ClearFake campaign in its entirety because it's really widely used, seemingly by anybody who could get their hands on it for multiple different reasons. So that's why we went with more of a kind of generic name. And then Vic had another comment in there about how many legitimate software would do this. Sounds like a high fidelity detection on the face of it. Would be surprised if lots of software also do that for a reason. So yeah, it's like if you see PowerShell running to set your clipboard to something or clear your clipboard, that's got to be a red flag, right? There, I can't think of any time I've legitimately set my my clipboard value through PowerShell, and I try to use PowerShell or command line for everything.
Yeah, that's
I
something
like
you
that
would just
interface.
set a variable for anyway.
Yeah, it seems very strange that somebody would do this for anything other than like a malicious purpose of any kind. I don't know if there's any software that would set your clipboard to anything or would clear it or clear your DNS cache or anything like that. So I would definitely be wary if you see any of these commands running in your environment.
Yeah, the download and the zip on extraction and execution from that point may not be as high of a fidelity because that is very common. You'll see that with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of
But
MSI
but
installers.
yeah, but again, this comes down to kind of like the holistic detections. It's just one little piece of the pie. It itself may not be a very good point, but everything surrounding it is. So
Yeah,
it's more
and
of an
then
after the fact if you've got to repiece the puzzle.
yeah, for sure. I was saying before we jump into the detections, that was kind of a good pivot point over to it. Just wanted to show this is what it looks like when we go in and check for or we go in to emulate the C2 check-ins. It's just invoke PowerShell command that's going to reach out, invoke web request, excuse me, out to the malicious C2 or the observed adversarial C2. This isn't going to interact with the website in any way. It's just going to reach out, see if it can touch it, and then close. So there's not going to be any traffic going back and forth. It's not going to pull down anything. You can see in here we have a 401, so forbidden or failed. These other ones with no responses are more than likely making a connection out to it, but we can check by switching over to the detections. So the top one, if you guys have been on any of our other Threat Thursdays, I'm sure you have heard me say it, but the suspicious CMD or PowerShell parent image, it is definitely my favorite detection that we have. So it again is any PowerShell or CMD process or image that is spawned by a parent image or parent process that is not in System32 program files 86. If it's not in there, it's anywhere else. I want to know about it. You should want to know about it. And this is exactly why it is very clear to see in here that this parent image, this TT clear fake, which would definitely have a stealthier name. It's not going to be as obvious as this, but you see something running out of the user profile in campaigns. Let's pretend it's downloads because that's more than likely where it's going to go anyway. Downloads or temp, right? So that's running outside of this odd directory. It's loading PowerShell or it's loading CMD, and then you can see all the commands that it's running over here. You see someone doing a set clipboard to null or set clipboard to this specific value, which is in our instance the cryptocurrency key, not real or not the cryptocurrency key, but the cryptocurrency wallet. that we made up. You see it here that it's running that temperature check, that it's decoded and it's running the temperature check. It's running another executable out of public, expanding archives, things like that. All of these should be enough of a red flag for you to dig in more and kind of see what else is going on, which is what we do in this dashboard. So then next, we know that this clearfake.exe is, or we don't know, we think that it's probably malicious, that it is at least odd and should be investigated a little bit further. So we're just looking at some other processes that are created by it, which we already have them all listed out here, so we didn't do it again in the dashboard, but we do look at files that were created by this clearfake executable. And we see these 3 PowerShell scripts, or these 3 PowerShell PSMs, PS1s that were executed. These are ran whenever a PowerShell script is run, it will run these and make these temporary files, which test your policy to see if it's allowed to execute. So these 3 files in and of itself are indicative, or these 2 files here in the middle, the PSM and the PS1, are indicative that clearfake.exe ran PowerShell in some kind of way. So that could be an indicator. Maybe if you start there, you see that these files exist and that clearfake.exe or TT clearfake.exe created them. It should have you thinking that it is running PowerShell in some form or fashion, right? It's really useful to hunt on things that occur every time. So even if they ran it in memory or via upshell, which is what we did via unmanaged PowerShell, it's still going to create these files because it has to check if it is able to run or not, right? And then an additional
Mhm.
file we see here that's being created is this clearfake.zip, which if we look up, we can also see that we've expanded that archive into this clearfake directory, which is then running this discovery.exe. So even with these few searches, these few detections, you can kind of quickly piece together that there are a lot of things happening that need to be investigated, right? We see that it's running PowerShell. We see in 2 different ways that it's running PowerShell. We see some PowerShell commands. We see it has this zip file. It's unzipping it. Typically, you would download a zip file because if you have it password protected or even large enough, your antivirus or your EDR is not going to look inside of it because it's too big or it's password protected and it can't. So if you see a file downloading a zip, probably want to check that. Probably want to check that out. And then down at the bottom, the last 2 we have are similar. They're like network connections or DNS queries from our clearfake.exe executable, and this is reaching out to those malicious C2 domains, excuse me, or those observed C2 domains that we had talked about, as well as our site C2, because that is what's giving it the command and control to execute additional commands. So we can see here that we have an executable TT clearfake.exe reaching out to all of these sites, which are all, again, observed malicious C2 infrastructure that's been utilized inside of the clearfake campaigns. And then on the right, we see it as network connections, which can be a little bit harder to kind of ascertain, as a lot of these are either hosted behind AWS or GCP or DigitalOcean, something like that, where it's a little harder to kind of run down because it doesn't really look like much of anything. I prefer the DNS queries for this, just because it's a little cleaner, a little easier to make out.
Yeah, and I think all in all, like this attack chain is really interesting, and there's a lot of little novel things kind of all paired together. It does require a large amount of user interaction, but none of the interaction is unrealistic. Is what it
Yep.
boils down to is like they've got to visit a site, the site has to be compromised. Then they get this pop-up which says, "Oh no, you've got a problem," and conveniently provides you the solution to the problem. So like again, that's not unrealistic for a user to go, "Yeah, sure, let's just fix it real quick so I can
Yeah.
get on to what I'm doing. I'm busy. I got a day trade. I got to do something, you know?"
Yeah. Well, especially with the pop-up that you had. I mean, it looked pretty good. I mean, it says Google Chrome at the top. It has the Chrome icon on it. Everything is in English. It's all spelled correctly. All in all, it is not a bad attempt to try to fool someone if you're just, like you said, quickly going through. You're trying to do your normal job. You're trying to do whatever where you're at your job, and you're trying to do crypto trading while your boss isn't around, and you're trying to quickly kind of go through it. It is definitely enough to convince someone or fool someone to go ahead and fix the fix the issue.
Yeah, this one's a really good example too of we're starting to see threat actors kind of hitting that another stage of evolution. They're adopting more novel attack chains or unique ways of doing things, like with the nested PowerShell or just like the sandbox checks or certain things like maybe once or twice you'll see those things somewhere else, but all of this paired together, it's kind of a cool example of it happening.
Yeah, for sure. Say
We
that
actually
is,
hit about time.
I think we just about hit it.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all we have for you guys today. Hopefully you liked this Clear Fake campaign IOC. We're going to show some more of these off here in the future. I think we've got another Threat Thursday live in what, 2 weeks, a
I think
week,
two
something
weeks.
like
Yeah.
that. Yep. So we will see you guys again here soon. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. See you.